Falling off. It's a term that in my opinion has become loosely thrown around in the anime community as much as the term masterpiece already has. As it's used heavily within the shonen community, its definition sounds exactly what you would expect it to be. When a certain piece of media, whether an anime, manga, and even webtoon, is claimed to reach its peak and doesn't continue to improve from there, or many think the quality has downgraded substantially altogether, falling off or fell off is the first thing people tend to associate with that said piece of media. Now typically this term is heavily associated with the more popular series, as there tends to not be such judgment imposed upon great series that don't have that global recognition. World Trigger being a perfect example, as even with it still being one of the most successful manga in Japan and in Da Vinci Magazine's top manga of 2023, you ask majority of Western fans if they even know what the series is and they'll look at you clueless. The biggest issue when it comes to discussing what may be great and no longer great is that anime fans refuse to meet in a form of middle ground of fairness and instead phrase their personal opinions as if it were truth. Rarely do you see a claim start with "in my personal opinion" or "personally for me," implying that it's not some big notion but rather a different view amongst millions. Instead, when we have people saying things fell off, we end up with many exaggerated or nonsensical motions, with many of them just causing petty drama. Now while there isn't exactly some form of clear-cut outline as to what determines a fall off, there are some aspects that people tend to constantly consider when this type of conversation is brought up. Those being anime reception, manga reception, series conversation, sales ratings and investments, and most importantly, social media perception. The first two are pretty self-explanatory. How are the anime and manga received amongst readers and watchers, both anime only and who read along? In many cases, you will look towards each of the respective communities and content creators who cover those series throughout the years, and most notably anime reactors. Reaction content is huge these days, and it's no secret that some of the biggest reactors out there play a part with exposure, as the anime only experience tends to bring out the purest forms of emotions in conversations. Nuanced praise and constructive criticism are what keep the momentum alive, and if the manga can provide that, with the anime elevating content with spectacular showcases of understanding the source material, then you pretty much have both of these checked off. Both of these contribute to series conversation. How much do you see people discussing and talking about these series? Are they being covered online or mentioned by some of the biggest figures in the world? Do you hear about the chapters trending or bombshell reveals that get the title of peak fiction, and are content creators keeping the hype up? Everybody is a fan of something, and whether or not that series is talked about in various settings is something people especially hold on to. With the big three, for example, shonen fans love to chase after the term iconic because it implies that no matter how much time has passed, there will always be a conversation to be held about that series for the moments and the arcs that become engraved within anime history. Of course, come last year, we saw how insane that conversation can get with Super Saiyan vs. Gear 5, but the fact remains that both One Piece and Dragon Ball had strong conversations about them all year long. It's also crucial that the impact of a series is impactful to the younger audience, as they are the ones who really grow up on such new generation anime and manga compared to us who grew up with primarily another. If you manage to have a mix of the young and the older audiences raving about your series throughout the years, then you for sure have series conversation locked in. As far as sales, ratings, and investments are concerned, this is a slippery slope because of the competitive nature of Western fans. I'ma be honest, I can't tell you why people care so much about sales and why the numeric argument being brought up is for some reason indicative to one series being better than another, but there is some important truth to take into account. Sales do keep the manga within the magazine, and anything that makes these companies money tend to get some heavy investment. One Piece, being Japan's baby for example, has gotten the VIP experience from its constant investment in talent to its ever-evolving anime. You can also take into consideration of movies, collaborations, promotions, and merchandise, but the main statistic brought up is always manga sales. Sales of course can be greatly influenced by an anime adaptation, as series like Blue Lock and Oshinoko skyrocketed for months on end because of their success. Ratings are also highly taken into consideration when using websites like Mal and IMDb. While I think ratings are definitely flawed because of things like review bombing being a common occurrence, the casual audience does pay attention to the number, and it does influence some of the best anime of all time conversations. It fuels the hype, and in which case keeps the relevancy very much afloat. Lastly, and arguably the most frustrating thing that people love to bring up, especially when it comes to communities and Twitter, is social media perception. Is your series trending or making waves worldwide? Is it getting the Kagurabachi level memes? Are celebrities tweeting about it? Do you see it constantly talked about weekly among your peers, friends, and even your specific feed or timeline of information? Now this one can be very obvious sometimes and yet not. Excluding global trends, one thing people must always keep in mind is that your social media feed slowly becomes personalized over time, with the technology behind it studying the things that you like, the things you may engage with, and what it believes you may want to see. While there are obvious moments and chapters that trend on social media, whether it's reveals, announcements, and even chapter leak details, not all all the time will you see specific scenarios people mention, such as slander. This can lead to the idea that your feed in particular should not be the thing that determines whether you believe a series is having traction on social media or not, because everyone's feed is different. What may be seen daily on one person's account may not ever appear on another, and it's imperative to keep that in mind because you'd be very surprised to see how many individuals operate on this mindset where if they don't see it, then it clearly can't be relevant. In the bigger picture though, for as long as the series in question is talked about on a large scale in the online world, then it could be checked off. With all that being established, there are two major series in mind that I have seen become entrapped in this conversation heavily as of last year. Those two being Jujutsu Kaisen and My Hero Academia. Shonen Jump's established titans that have managed to be known as some of the best the magazine has to offer, and yet is in this complex conversation when it comes to falling off. I want to start with JJK Season 2 considering its recent conclusion, and it's pretty easy to say that as far as content adaptation goes, this season is one of the Hall of Famers. Almost every other week, this season was having the anime community splooge all over the place, and even with the production related issues, it stuck the landing by any means necessary. The Shibuya incident is the game changer arc, as nothing is the same after, yet that also applies to the reception for many when it comes to the writing quality. Listen, I'll go ahead and just say this now, but even myself am not a huge fan of JJK past Shibuya. I do not like culling games like that compared to the fandom, and I do believe that the quality of the series, excluding the fights and choreography, has deteriorated for me when it was never held to a high quality to begin with. If there are any common complaints about the series, it's been pacing, how Gege handles death, and the lack of breathing room. A lot of people hate that there hasn't, and at this point with the manga, we'll never have some downtime to really flesh out certain exchanges and character moments that they feel was necessary. People feel very disconnected with these characters because they hit the chopping block so quick or are pretty much useless, and that it's pretty much Gege pulling a name out of the jar to see who will die next. With a bunch of fights happening back to back, there is a lack of in-between substance that people crave but will never get, and as such ride along for the meathead action. These, among other complaints that I have spectated, have led to conversations about whether or not Jujutsu Kaisen has fallen off. Listen, it's very much okay to critique the series because Gege isn't a perfect author, and there is always going to be some form of room for poor writing choices. It's simply the nature of the game. Some complaints I do resonate with, but to say the series has fallen off is a ginormous jump of judgment. And this is my problem with the fall off argument. What people really refuse to say is that for themselves, the series is simply no longer as enjoyable. Yet it never comes out that way, and instead takes their phrase to drag the whole series down when it's just not true. While somebody may not expect everyone to agree, when you have a bunch of people rallying behind your takes online, that sometimes is all it takes to get the false narrative running. The anime community loves to take any negative or constructive criticism and run with it for the sake of agenda. It's a cynical cycle that constantly plagues almost every fandom, and the more popular a show is, let alone a popular shonen, the more obvious it becomes. I may not be the biggest JJK fan, but to say it fell off would be a huge stretch. Season 2 was one of the defining anime last year. The sales are as high as they could be realistically. The manga is covered on a chapter by chapter basis, and every reactor couldn't begin to hold their breath for the entire fall season. There wasn't a Thursday that went by that you didn't hear about JJK, and almost every morning you'd see the conversation about the series skyrocket on those episode drop days. With not only one of the most successful movies, but an immediate season 3 announced as well, in the face of the consumer, these results are what really matter. Yet this isn't to say that the writing quality is immune to being critiqued, and this, if anything, is where the complaints need to be directed towards. I promise you, it is more than okay to admit that a series has fell off for you when it comes to quality or enjoyment. It's also more than okay to fall out of love with a story because you as a consumer don't have to love everything an author delivers. It is important though to phrase and specify when you make these types of claims because it gives a basis for people who are loud and wrong to get even louder. Anime TikTok especially is from hell itself. Gege, in my opinion, has definitely had some rough decisions over the course of culling games and beyond, but I'm not dense enough to pretend like the series itself has fallen off, but rather my own enjoyment overall has. Now in My Hero Academia's case, this is a layered conversation that we really have to sit and evaluate with the anime only experience versus the manga experience. In terms of success, it's no secret that it is also one of the most successful series to date. Sales never having a dangerous dip and going through the natural motions, tons of collaborations abroad with even comic artists alongside 3 going into 4 movies and 6 going into 7 seasons. Yet the conversation around the series has met an even split down the middle coming off of season 5. To TLDR this, season 5 was a disaster for those who read the manga and followed up with the anime because of the adaptation not meeting the results we all would have liked. The disappointment has pretty much carried itself for a long time now within the MHA community, especially with manga readers not liking Act 3 as a whole. This has led to many falling off the hype train and conversations around around the series being more of a minefield. However, this is not the case for all readers and watchers, as many are still in love as much as day one and continue to follow the series. On top of that, the anime-only crowd reception has been hugely positive, with many feeling satisfied with these years of build-up coming off of PLW. Not only are many reactors still tagging along almost 10 years later to continue this journey, but even newer ones are catching up and currently binging the anime in time for season 7. Now late last year, Chibi Reviews made a video titled "MHA has fallen off so hard it can be studied for generations." A heck of a claim that led me to sit down and watch the entire video before jumping to a conclusion. While there is some truth and things I also disagree with greatly, the surprising thing that I noticed was that a lot of the comments do not believe MHA has fallen off and in fact still enjoy this final arc a lot while still discussing the obvious flaws. Hence why I say this conversation is layered, because a lot of the positive and negative talk is done within pockets of the community. However, as we know, what tends to stand out the most is negativity or controversy, because those things just tend to attract. Yet while you may see a viral tweet saying that the series fell off, you can go to the comment section of the ED or OPs of season 6 and still find a humongous amount of people who still enjoy the content. Hence why I believe that social media perception is kind of annoying. I think that there are plenty of fair arguments to make about the writing quality within the manga as well as the presentation of the anime. It's clear that while the MHA team respects the work as much as they're allowed to, business-wise, MHA is a moneymaker without the respect of its success. Its constant cycle of yearly production has shown its cracks over the years, and a passionate team will only be allowed to show that passion for as much as their restraints allow them to do. Manga-wise, there have been conversations year-round about things that were handled poorly or could have been handled better. Bakugo's revival, the discrimination plotline, the controversy of All Might versus All for One, there are some solid talking points to criticize. Yet I also want to mention that criticizing still contributes to that series conversation. Talking about a series doesn't always mean it'll be good, and through its ups and downs, MHA has had a mix of both. If people still have the energy to discuss a series that they may not enjoy so much, I'd argue that shows how much of a strong hold it can have on the audience through thick and thin. Regardless of how you feel, creating a superhero manga inspired by Western themes and during the height of the MCU was a genius idea on Horikoshi's part. Whether you want to admit it or not, MHA is still pretty significant. Still in 2023's top 10 selling manga of all time, even after other giants making huge profit. Collaborations popping out left and right before season 7, all available pieces of media still being produced, and when looking in those parameters, it will remain relevant all the way to the end, and you best believe that the anime-only crowd are going to be absolutely thrilled for the final battle. Once again, I am reiterating the fact that it is more than okay to admit to yourself that it has fallen off for your own personal views or liking. At the end of the day, no Twitter feed, no Discord community, no viral tweet, and no content creator can solely determine whether or not something falls off. There are a lot more aspects and opinions that one person cannot control in their own that really determines this outcome, which is why I always stress that having your own opinions and takes is so much more important than what the internet decides to scream into a vacuum. Now this whole time, I've dialed in on these two series because of how much of a hot topic they are when it comes to critique and discussion, but there are plenty of other anime and series that have in fact fallen off for concrete reasons that are more blunt than any of the ones that I listed earlier. 2019's The Promised Neverland still being one of the most brutal fall-offs ever, with a second season that not only cut content but sped ran itself into the ground, skipping the most crucial content and shoving it into a slideshow. Till this day, we have no idea where the author is and why they chose these changes for the adaptation. One Direct Priority, which could have been one of the best original anime ever, swan dived off a roof and into the garbage with a finale special that nobody could piece together. Literally, till this day, I have yet to find a single video or breakdown that has managed to put the final pieces of content together and make it make sense. The Seven Deadly Sins getting memed to the afterlife with one of the most painful examples of an adaptation downgrade so bad that people gave up on it entirely. It was already rough enough that the manga had multiple instances of questionable dialogue and writing choices, but the absolute butchering of Meliodas versus Escanor hunts us all till this day. These scenarios can happen to any series across any genre, and I'm sure there are plenty of romance stories that went sour or seinen series that lost its way along the path. Truthfully speaking though, you don't really hear much from either of those genres about falling off complaints. Like, I've never heard the take of Vinland Saga or Loving Yamada falling off. Yet shonen is always at the center of things like this, and it's primarily due to the constant comparisons, the constant competition, the need for your series to be at the top, and it overshadows people's genuine feelings of dislike for a series. Thus, we come back to the beginning when I say that falling off is a term that in my opinion is something that I cannot take at face value. You see it being tossed at every series, just like the term mid. Even at One Piece during the controversial conclusion around Wano's arc, yet here we are with Egghead taking the world by storm just the other day. I mean, have you seen that that new opening, it's not even fair how good it is. To bring this to a close, let me say this. Excluding the more obvious examples, this term is really just one massive opinion that 9 times out of 10 is a personal feeling rather than some universally accepted fact. People love to rile each other up with their opinions, but you don't have to reason with what you don't resonate with. It is okay for a series to over time not have that same level of popularity or talk as time goes on. For the ones that do manage to remain up there in the conversation the entire time, then great, but yet for the ones that may get quieter or even ride into the sunset, majority of the time it's more natural than you think. With how much new anime and manga come out year long, there is always going to be something new that takes people's attention, and I think that shows the improvement of quality in the medium rather than how something isn't supposedly good anymore. But at the end of the day, the most important thing to ask yourself is if it has fallen off for you. No matter how quiet or popular a series is, if it hasn't fallen off for you and you still enjoy it chapter by chapter, episode by episode, then that is the thing that will matter over anything else people have to say. With that brings me to the end of this video. As always, thank you for watching the first video of 2024. Make sure to leave all your thoughts in the comment section down below and let me know how you feel about this topic. Stay warm out there and I'll catch you guys in the next one.